We are talking about Nehemiah. Have you seen anyone being called Nehemiah?
No.
Why? Because he was a what? Why are people not calling their children Nehemiah?
They don't know the name.
They don't know the name. So now we are talking about Nehemiah. And Nehemiah, we're starting with the political background. And we are going to start with how Jerusalem was taken over by Babylon. You remember that is where we were talking about when we were talking about Jeremiah, right? So Judah was taken over by Babylon. And when it was taken over, you remember we said that the wall, the temple, they were all done what? They were destroyed. The wall, the temple, and the whole of Jerusalem was destroyed. So the king's officials and other people were taken where? They were taken to Babylon. So now they were under the Babylonian rule. Then after some time, because we said that the Jews now from Babylon the Jews from Jerusalem now, they stayed in Babylon for 70 years. That is what we said. So after a while, when the Jews now who are living in Jerusalem were taken to Babylon, Babylon was conquered by Persia. So Persia started ruling Babylon. And now they had a king, a Persian king who came there, and he was called King Cyrus. You see, many people are called Cyrus. Yes, there was a Persian king who was called Cyrus. And he started ruling people with governors. So he had many governors who were ruling the people. And now anyone who was in Babylon, whether you are from Jerusalem or you were born there in Babylon, you started paying taxes to the Persian king, who was King Cyrus. So when King Cyrus came into power, he wanted the people of Judah to go back to where? To Jerusalem. To go back to their land. Now they could get out of, he wanted them to get out of where? Of Babylon, and go where? And go back to their land. That is in Jerusalem. They were Jews. And he wanted them to go, and he allowed them to go in 3 stages. There was the first group. The first group, the person who was in charge was Joshua. It was led by Joshua. Joshua was a high priest. And also was led by another governor who was the first governor of Judah. He's called Sheshbazzar. He was the first governor of Judah. So the first group, I said, it was led by Joshua and Sheshbazzar, who was the first governor of Judah when they went back to Jerusalem. Then there was the second group, because I said they went in 3 what? Stages. The second group was led by Ezra. There are also people called Ezra. And he was a priest. And then there was the third group. The third group was led by Nehemiah. And the Nehemiah was appointed as the governor. As the governor of Judah. So he led the last group. That is all about political. So when you're talking about the political government, you should start where Judah was conquered by what? By Babylon. And then the king, the officials, and the other people were taken in exile. And then you also talk about now they were taken in exile in Babylon, and they were ruled in Babylon. But after a while, Persia conquered Babylon. So Babylon was under the rule of Persia. And there was a king known as Cyrus, who took over now. And he's the one who allowed the people of Judah to go back to Jerusalem. And they went in the 3 stages, as I told you. So we go to the social background. When the people went back, now they are the Jews, they went back to Jerusalem. They found that people had foreign influence. They were influenced by other people from there. So that means the people who remained in Judah had foreign influence. And these people in Judah had married foreigners. Remember, they were conquered by Babylon. So they married foreigners, and after they married foreigners, they gave birth to Samaritans. There was another new kind of people called Samaritans. So Samaritans were there all over. That is their social life. So when these people from exile came back, they found also there were other people from Judah who were very wealthy. Those who came were wealthy, some of them, and also there were other people in Judah who were very wealthy. So these wealthy people started oppressing the people in Judah. They started oppressing the poor. They were wealthy and they were powerful. So they started oppressing the poor in Judah. They were selling the poor as slaves if they refused to pay their debt. They were selling them as slaves if they refused to pay their debt. And this is a time whereby Nehemiah returned or came to Judah, and he told them they should return the property that they took from the poor. Anything they've taken from the poor, they should return it. And they should also make donations for the benefit of the poor. So that is social life. When you're talking about the social life, of the social background of Nehemiah, you have to talk about how they came back and found the foreign influence. They had married foreigners, the people who had remained in Judah, and then they gave birth to Samaritans. And then you have to talk about the rich oppressing the what? The poor. And then they were selling them in slavery if they did not pay their debt. So Nehemiah came to be and told them they should return back the property of the poor that they took, and they should offer donations to them. Then we go to religious background. Here it is whereby it is very important, the religious background of Nehemiah. When the Jews were in exile, they were allowed to worship their own God, who's Yahweh. So they were worshiping God. When they returned back. Remember when before they went to Babylon in exile, the temple in Jerusalem. You learned about the temple in Jerusalem. It had been destroyed. So when they came back to Judah, they first started by building altars. They built altars and then they reconstructed. After building altars whereby they were praying, they continued praying, and then they rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem, which was the center of worship. They rebuilt the wall of Jerusalem. And then the wall, when they were rebuilding the wall, that is where the name of Nehemiah comes to being. Because when they were rebuilding the wall, Nehemiah was in charge. He was in charge of the rebuilding of the wall, and he was the governor. And here you have to mention that the wall was rebuilt for how many days? 52 days. From there, we go to the historical background or historical life of Nehemiah. Nehemiah means what? What does the name Nehemiah mean? Yahweh has comforted. The name, yes, he has comforted. He comforted the people of Judah. Nehemiah means Yahweh was comforted. And where does Nehemiah come from? Nehemiah was one of the people from Judah who were in exile. Was one of the people from Judah who went into exile. He was one of them. And he was the son of Ekaliah. Is it Ekaliah? Yes. Of Judah. And Nehemiah was a prophet. But you have to say that to start with, he was working as a cupbearer at the king's place. He was working as a cupbearer. What does a cupbearer do? He tastes wine before the what? The king. So you taste the wine of the king, you say whether it is good or bad. When you say it is good, it is given to the who? To the king. So he was the cupbearer of the king. He tasted the wine given to the king. So when he was working for the king, he received a message from Judah that the people from exile who had gone back to Judah were suffering. They were suffering. So what he did is he went to King Artaxerxes. Now who was the king? He was working for King Artaxerxes. So he went to Artaxerxes and requested him to go back to where? To Judah. And King Artaxerxes accepted and appointed him as a governor and told him to go back and rebuild what? Rebuild Jerusalem. So that is where now we start with Nehemiah. So from there we're supposed to go and talk about occasions when Nehemiah prayed. Uliza swali.